Hello, this is Andrew McNamee, and this is my final project for CIS 9467. For this final project, I'm going to demonstrate Excel's tools of what-if analysis and solver. In sticking with the theme of my midterm project, I've decided to continue with the Broadway musical, and for this project, I've created a business scenario of producing a Broadway musical. My musical is Weekend at Bernie's the Musical, starring Hom Tanks and Rulia Jobberts, two of the most well-known Broadway actresses out there. So we're going to produce this musical. The first thing I did was create a budget. Started with the pre-production costs, which are shown here. As you can see, it gets pretty expensive to make a musical. The sets, the creative team, all of the advertising up front, the salaries. The salaries for the cast includes salaries for rehearsals only, not for the actual production. And we get to the end here with the administrative costs, and we see the startup cost is little over $15 million here. We also created an operating budget. This is our weekly operating budget. So we have our cast salaries. This is their weekly salaries. And some marketing costs. This budget for operating consists of both fixed and variable expenses. So the rent is $10,000 a week plus 4% of revenue. And the other percentage parts are the royalties here. So with these two budgets, I created a profit and loss scenario here. The first thing I want to do is figure out what our break-even point is. We're going to use two variables here. We have the average ticket price and the projected sales capacity. How many tickets do we sell? We sell 55% of tickets that week. So we're going to do a break-even analysis on this table over here, and we're going to use those two variables, and we're going to try to calculate this number here, which is set right here. After cleaning it up a bit, this is what our break-even analysis looks like. So obviously we want to stay above 80% or so of capacity, and it'd be nice to be above 110 or so of average ticket price in order to confirm we remain profitable. The next thing we're going to look at is setting our advertising budget. So we've found that advertising on print will help raise our average ticket price, whereas advertising on radio will help raise our projected capacity. So we need to find a balance between these two numbers here. We also need to find how much of our operating margin we should spend on advertising. So if we take the revenue, we subtract the fixed costs and the percentage costs, it leaves operating margin, and then we're going to use a certain percentage of that in the advertising budget. This is the advertising parameter here. So what we need to do is find the numbers for these yellow cells that maximize our weekly operating profit and loss. We can do this using Solver. The cell we want to maximize is our investor balance and our running cash balance combined. So I went ahead and entered in this final cell here the running balance between the investor balance, the sum of those two. And that's the cell we're going to maximize. So we go to our solver, we set the objective to be that cell, we want to maximize it, and we have all of these constraints that we've entered. These constraints are associated with these yellow cells. They have to add to 100%. This cell cannot go above 1 because that represents a percent as well. And we have to at least keep 15% on television and online radio. From here, we will use the solver. Solver found a solution. We can look at the answer report and keep the solution. So here the solution shows that 38% should be spent on print advertising of our advertising budget, and of our operating margin, 42.7% should be spent on advertising. This is what we need to do to maximize our return to investor. So now that we know our parameters, we can look to see when our musical is going to break even. So we've returned a $500,000 chunk to the investor right here on this date. So on January 17th, 2021, that's about 72 weeks after we open, is when we would expect to break even. That is the date that we recoup our investment costs. I've also made this so that when we enter the actual instead of the projected, the cells are conditionally formatted, so now we know that when they turn green, that's actual and not just projected. And then, so these are some made-up scenarios of average ticket price for the first few weeks of running and the average capacity. We could run Solver again and see if, now that we have some real data, it has changed at all. And we can see it changed a little bit. Spend a little bit more on print, spend a little less of our operating margin. We can look at the answer reports to see which of the variables were binding and not binding. If they're binding, that means we were up against it, and that was what caused it from stopping. So we can see that the non-binding ones are the ones that are still free to flex, and those are the ones that would be really hard to find on our own what the optimal answer is. So the advertising parameter, the percentage spent on radio, the percentage spent on print, or the non-binding. I hope this scenario helps demonstrate some of the powers of Excel and how useful the solver technology can be in finding business solutions. I'd like to give acknowledgement to Mitch Weiss, who wrote The Business of Broadway. It was in this book that I was able to find relevant budgeting criteria for a Broadway musical in order to make this report realistic. Thanks for your time.